Hello and welcome to Backstage Church. We're just real people having real conversation. And speaking of real people, we all know that we all work for a church. You guys know we all work for a church, the same church, coincidentally. And
is it a coincidence? Not trying to interrupt the flow, is it? All right, sorry.
I don't. That's just what happens. But a lot of times people are going to think, how are we real? We don't have a real job. All we do is we sit around, hold little ladies' hands, and pray with them in the hospital, and we spend all our other time just walking around praying, working one day a week, which is Sunday, and that's it. So I kind of want to dispel some of that myth here today, and as well as show how even being in a ministry position is real people. We do have real jobs, and just kind of give you a look behind, truly backstage, of how our life is like working at a church.
Finally, living up to the name. I'm so excited.
Woohoo! Let's all start here. Just get a little bit of background here. PK has a little bit of your background. How did you start working for the church or this church? How is that? I'm sure you have plenty of stories, but how is what we do here? How does that compare with real work out in the real world?
Real work. We don't do real work.
Whoa.
Well, for me, it was I was in full-time ministry between 1982 and 1998. Everything from youth pastoring, music pastoring, to being a lead pastor at a church down in Ohio. Went through a situation in my life where I had to step away from ministry for a season. And I was actually working in the conveyor industry and material handling, and worked in that arena for, probably 11 years. Mm-hmm. And I had been attending this church. I had moved back up here from Ohio, was attending this church, and because Pastor Richard knew my background, that I was a minister and that type of thing, and been working in ministry, he had me doing he had me fill in for him when he was gone and different things like that. So eventually it came down to the point I was serving on the elder board, and he came to me and talked to me if I would be interested in coming on staff to be his associate, which kind of took me aback in the way that I found out about it. But anyway, so I did a lot of praying about it, really didn't have an interest in coming back into full-time ministry. Was married, had been, actually remarried, 6 kids, working hard, and I liked the job I was doing. But yet at the same time, you always know that you've got this call on your life to minister. But what it did teach me was that I don't have to have a title and be in full-time ministry to minister, right? And so he asked me, I prayed, God confirmed that in a number of different ways. So I came on staff here in January of 2009 to serve as his associate. So that's kind of my thing around there. So I have not only my Bible college degree, I have another bachelor's degree in a different field that went along with my other job that I had. So it's been a ride, man. It's been a real ride. Yeah. Working with Pastor Richard has been awesome. Doing everything from life groups to filling in the pulpit to working with different groups within the church and all those kinds of things. So that's kind of, and really there's it's all in how you look at it. For me, I was asked one time as a youth pastor by a dad his daughter was in my youth group, and she felt a call of God to go into full-time ministry. And he came to me and he said, I want you to talk to her. And I said, why? He says, because I want you to talk her out of that. Oh, and I said, what are you talking about? Why? He says, I want her to have a real job, not just something she does one day a week.
Right.
And I just I looked at him, grinned, and just kind of walked away, because I had worked for General Motors on the assembly line. I had worked, and I tell you what, you put in, people don't think you put in that many hours. I mean, and you know better, Nick. I know the kind of hours you put in, dude. But I put in as many or more time, as much more time than I did in the secular world. Mm-hmm. So from that standpoint, it's not just visiting hospitals and holding little old ladies' hands and praying praying for 8 hours a day. So that's kind of my backdrop to it. And people used to ask me, well, how does it feel to be back in the ministry? And I used to tell them, I never left the ministry, man.
Right.
I just paid my bills a different way.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter whether we're in the church or whether you're in a secular work environment, we're all called to minister.
Yeah.
One's just in the role of a pastor in a church. The other's just in the role of life ministry out there with other people. So hopefully that came across okay.
What about you, Chris?
Well, first of all, I never understood the concept of people thinking, well, all you just get paid to pray all day and study scripture, and I never understood that because my dad was a pastor, and so I grew up in the church seeing not only my dad but a whole slew of people working hard, doing all kinds of different tasks and different things. So I never understood that concept, and so obviously I pursued youth ministry, and I can attest it's definitely a lot of work. It's definitely not what most people think or whatnot. I saw yesterday on Facebook in the youth pastor group, another youth pastor was asking, hey, what are some stereotypes that people have about youth pastors? And so these are things that people wrote from their own experience, and I copied and pasted them. So there's real youth pastors. One day, youth pastor stereotype, one day you'll be a real pastor.
Yep, heard that.
Because youth ministry is just a stepping stone. And you know what? There are those, I'm sure, that treat youth ministry as stepping stone and see it that way. I don't. I think it's a call, and I think it's something that, prayerfully you do for longevity, because the real rewards of youth ministry are in the longevity. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, you got that right.
Youth pastors are just learning to be a real pastor. Youth pastor stereotype: coffee hipster, game guy, crazy extrovert. None of which apply to me, although I like coffee. Whatever. Youth pastor stereotype: irresponsible. Yep. They simply hang out with students and play games all the time. And I think that's the core. A lot of people think that's youth ministry. You were paid to spend time just hanging out and playing games. And even if that were true, I don't even really like playing games. So, that's work for me. But that's just definitely a lot more to it than that. Youth pastors are just big children, disorganized, late. They can't grow up, and they don't have a real job. And I've actually been asked on more than one occasion what my job is by people who go to my church. And I'm the youth pastor here. And not so much this church, but I'm a youth pastor here. And people would respond, no, where do you work during the week? Here. And so I definitely know the feeling of people not being sure that you have a real job. And I'm grateful to be in a position where I can work at a church and do youth ministry full time. I know that is a luxury. A lot of youth pastors out there are part-time or unpaid. Yeah. And let me tell you, I know some of those folks. And some folks, where am I from? I know some of those guys. They work so hard. And I have so much respect for youth pastors who are working full-time in a career outside of the church, but also putting in the hours to do youth ministry. And those are the ones I have respect for. And if you know someone who is a volunteer youth pastor, I promise you, they're working harder than anyone you know. You should give them a hug or a Starbucks gift card, or both.
Or whatever restaurant, fast food place of their choice.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
There you go.
Whatever they prefer there. No, it's really interesting. So I used to work at a different church, and through series of events, end up leaving staff and went to work in sales. But between my previous church job and this church job, I have not worked so many hours.
Yeah.
Ever. It's just been crazy. And I was working commission sales. Yeah. It was I got paid for how much I sold, and I put in a decent amount of hours there. Yeah. But it's funny because a lot of people ask, I'm the tech guy at the church. Oh, okay. What do you do during the week? No, I'm the tech guy at the church. Oh,
just more than
you get paid full time for that. I'm I am blessed to be able to get paid full time to do this job.
Yeah.
And we all know, especially those who attend RCC who are watching this, you guys all know that the amount of stuff that I've had to be involved in the last 6 months has went from 0 to 180 in the course of 48 hours.
Yes.
It went from one day being normal, but still, we still put in a lot of hours, put in a lot of work, to the fact where my wife and I have to have a whole schedule set up. So she knows when I'm coming, when I'm going, what late nights I'm there, what late nights I'm not. So that way she can actually plan life. And that way, so one, she can plan life, which is very important. But two, so I come home. Because it's very easy for me to just get wrapped up in the job I'm doing. And then I could be here from 8 a.m. to midnight.
Easily, And you have
4, 5, 6 days a week. And there are times where it's called for and I do it. And there's times where it's not, but I do it anyways. And so trying to work that out and those hours for that is important. So as an executive pastor, what are some of the things that you do all day?
Wow.
Give us a glimpse.
To sum it up in a word is to be a facilitator of Pastor Richard's vision.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that have to go on and take place. I see my role as making sure, I try to make it my goal that he has to think, that he doesn't have to think about things except for what he needs to do. Especially on when there's services, Sunday. He's the man. He's the voice and the leader of this body here at Rochester. And his primary function on any given Sunday morning or when we have a service is to have his mind right with the mind of the Lord, to be able to deliver the word of the Lord for this house and give direction to this house. So anything that I can do to take off of his plate that makes that job and process easier is what my goal is. Now here at the church, I head up our life group ministry, which is just coordinating that, getting people trained, helping them, motivate them. And especially in this season we've just been through with, the COVID pandemic and not having regular church. And it was even tougher because people couldn't gather. So trying to get them coordinated to do their life groups on Zoom meetings, and that type of thing. And then encouraging them just to, especially those that are facilitating or leading life groups, to get them to be able to reach out to all of their people and just to check on them, make sure they're doing okay, and that type of thing. And I know people probably wonder, well, what did you guys do the whole time during the pandemic? Well, most of us, number one, Nick lived here. And Pastor Richard has made this statement. He said if you would have told him a year ago or even 6 months ago that the most important guy on staff would be the tech guy, he said he would have thought you were nuts. But that is what has happened because Nick literally has been the leader here in this church and keeping us ministry focused, ministry oriented, and making sure that we have that not only the equipment but the technological know-how of how to get, because we were online 6 days a week, plus we were live streaming our service. So all the different things that we did every night, some of it people were doing it from home and zooming in and doing that type of thing. Other stuff was still happening here at the church. But I mean, seemed like every night we come in here, there was a different setup and many times those setups were initiated at a moment's notice. So boom, boom, boom. And this guy, I don't think I've ever heard the word no come out of his mouth. It was, Pastor, if that's what you want, PK, if that's what you want, we'll make it happen. And that's what he's done. So he has been phenomenal. And let me just give a shout out to his intern. Jonathan Peisklo has been helping him out. He's behind the camera. You don't see him, but Nick's been cracking the whip on him, man, and training him and helping him learn and different things. So we've all been involved in very many different aspects. So for my thing, it's just making sure, does everybody have what they need to do their job? Whether it's ushers, whether that's our security team. I lead up our in-house security team. All of those things. There's just a whole plethora of stuff that you do. It's amazing. You come in here thinking I'm going to do one thing, and it's amazing how that can change in a heartbeat, and you're doing something else. And but a lot of it is just loving on people. loving on people, being there for people, letting people know you care, being there with families that are facing unique situations, whether it be family members in the hospital, family members in the having surgery, things of that nature. Being there when people's loved ones are passing away, and you're called on to be there in that moment to walk them through that. So there's just and yes, I'm a preacher at heart.
Yeah.
I love to teach and preach the word. I love that. I love being able to help people digest that and what does that look like in everyday life. So there's a whole plethora, but basically I'm kind of the right-hand man. I'm called to help Pastor Richard in whatever way I can. Because here's the deal that people don't realize. Pastor Richard and I have talked about this a lot, is that for anybody in ministry, you're working with volunteers.
Yeah.
And, when you're out in the secular work world, you've always got the ultimate carrot and stick. It's called your salary.
Yeah.
To get people to do their job. And you have that, look, if you don't want to do the job, there's a door, Within church ministry, when you're dealing with volunteers, you have to come up with a rather unique way to be able to recruit them, motivate them, encourage them, and release them into what God's called them to do. Yeah. So that in and of itself is huge. Being able to, that you work with a volunteer crew. That you work with volunteers all the time. Plus, you work with teenagers. God bless you, my son. You work with teens and that whole thing. And so there's just a whole plethora of stuff that goes on.
Yeah. So, Chris, what is the hardest thing kind of dive in a little bit as to what you do, and then what is the hardest thing when it comes to being a youth pastor?
Okay. I can answer that. Before I do, I feel like the heart of this episode is really brag on Nick. Because, look, you don't understand, you might a little bit, the pivot he's had to do, the many pivots he's had to do, especially the last few months. It's remarkable and incredible, the constant ingenuity and making things work at a moment's notice, and not just the technological know-how. I know you're loving this. He's so humble. He's not loving this. But the heart and the character. Yep. There's definitely moments he's been asked to do things that were inconvenient and frustrating and challenging. But, he did it. And he never had a bad word or a dishonoring word to say about anyone. Yep. And just appreciate it tenfold. So, youth ministry. There's a lot of things that go into it. Really, just hang out with students and play games. That's
that's all you do.
That's all you do,
man. Of it. No. Well, of course, that is a part of it because ministry happens out of relationship. And so it's really important to develop connections with students and give opportunity for students to create connections with each other. Yep. And so, we're going to play games and we're going to have fun because that's when bonding can happen. And my heart is that students don't just have church friends from a couple of years, but can develop relationships that will sustain them throughout their life.
That's good.
And that is really to create those deeper relationships. But on top of that, and I love spending time with students, but I don't really love the game portion. I said that before, but it's worth repeating because that's not in my DNA. But, we do it anyway because I do believe that there's value in it. But on top of that, there's all the event planning and event coordinating and administration and organizing that goes in to not only every event, but the functioning of the ministry. I got to keep track of these kids. I got to know who they are. I got to figure out how to contact them. And sometimes I'm good at it, and sometimes I'm not as good at it as I want to be. And taking even the kids a part of it. There's trying to connect with parents and remembering that I'm not here just to minister to kids. I can't just take the kids' side and be their buddy every time anything happens. I'm here to support parents and to let parents know I'm on their side and communicate with them and make sure they know what we're going on. Because believe it or not, kids aren't always the best at communicating with their parents about this event that they want to go to. Surely nothing's worse for a parent than a kid. The day of an event, are you ready to go? We're going to the youth event. And the parent's like, what are you talking about? No, you're not going. I don't even know about it. So trying to communicate and work with parents. And then there's, the communication aspect and communication side of it. I gotta have hopefully something of value to speak and say to them. or at least create an atmosphere where they can receive value, right? Then there's orchestrating the youth service, and I'm blessed to be able to work with students to help it develop them to lead worship, and to work with you as you work with some of our students to develop them to do some of the technical aspects of service. And so, not just hanging out with students, but developing students so that they can do ministry, which is the call of the church anyway, right? Like we're the pastors, the teachers, the evangelists, the prophets, the apostles, they don't exist to do the ministry. They exist to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And that is true for students and for youth ministry as well. And then, of course, working to connect them to the larger body of Christ, connect them to the church. And that is probably just a snippet of what youth ministry does. It's not exhaustive by any means, but hopefully you can kind of get the idea that it's not just showing up and hanging out with students. It's a lot of work, and it's fulfilling, and it's worthwhile work, and I love it, and I wouldn't change it. But there's definitely work, and some of it is wonderful, and some of it's challenging and tedious, and I don't love it, but it's more rewarding than it is tedious. So,
I just want to say, Chris, that youth ministry is something because it's not just doing all of those things. You have to have an understanding of the culture of our teenagers today. I spent 10 years as a youth pastor. But the reality is that, dude, I could not go back. I would not want to be a youth pastor today. Not that I don't love kids and love teens. It's the fact my understanding of the culture is so far removed from what it was when I was there. It's a very unique calling. And you've got parents that have kids that have gone astray, and they're coming to you looking for answers.
Right.
What do I do? How do I handle this? How do I navigate that? And so, and you do a great job with that. The way that the teens that you've come in and you have a very young group, but now they're growing, and you're launching kids. And the other thing, you're teaching them how to be leaders. You've got kids now that were doing stuff, and now they're leaders over the groups that are doing the stuff. So I mean, it's a challenge, and youth ministry is difficult because the youth culture is changing
every 6 months.
Constantly.
It's a whole new culture,
and so trying to stay on top of that and being a part of that is awesome. You do a good job, man.
Yeah, and it's funny that you talk about culture specifically because that's not something that I'm instinctively good at. Even when I was a teenager, I had no idea what was going on in youth culture because I didn't listen to music. At least non-Christian music. I didn't watch the culturally popular TV shows. So I understand more about youth culture now than I did when I was a youth. It's just interesting, and that is it's just another thing of you have to pay attention to trends, and you have to follow, and then subscribe to people who are better at it than I am, so they can just send me emails and tell me about it. That's a little cheat, I guess, but we gotta study and pay attention. And,
right.
Well, so I find it very interesting because, as you guys alluded to, there's so much stuff that even I have to do in the sense of not just the actual technical side of actually making sure that things are running. Part of it is, if you guys don't know, I do the IT in the church building right now, as well as all the camera and video stuff, as well as make sure all the sound stuff works, as well as, other than the maintenance equipment when it comes to the vacuum cleaners, if it plugs into a wall, in some way, shape, or form, I'm kind of in charge of it. That's kind of how I've done it for a lot of other people. But the hardest part of what I do is not that stuff. It's about trying to plan for the future of where things are going technologically. Because the problem is that things move so fast and pivot on a dime with what is important. For those of you who don't know what HD DVDs are, that explains it, because there was a time when there was HD DVD and Blu-ray, and churches threw in the gauntlet as to which one was most important to do. Blu-ray won. In case you're wondering, Blu-ray won that. Same thing between LEDs and I can't remember what the other one was that was
LEDs
plasma.
and LCDs and plasma.
Who cares?
Yeah. So that's part of thinking that ahead and trying to be that mindset for the church, and for the organization is important. But one of the hardest things that I found with what we do because we're so much in the thick of it. We're so much in the middle of it. Really is Sunday mornings and services because none of us are able just to sit around and just soak in Sunday mornings. Right. And that's one of the things that I hear. So it's funny when people are like, oh, yeah, you need to get a real job. It's like, you understand that, like, my weekend, I don't have weekends.
Yeah. My
days off are not normally days off.
Right.
Because something's always happening. And then on top of that, I'm supposed to make sure that I'm in the presence of God. Yeah. In the time that I don't, in the free time that I really don't have.
Yep.
And I find myself a lot of times being in that Martha culture where everyone's sitting at the feet of Jesus and you're the one that's in the back making sure everything's all ready.
Right.
And when I read that story, in the Gospels, it breaks my heart because I'm like, I get mad at Jesus. Which is really hard to think about. How do you get mad at Jesus? Because he's like, Martha, no, you should have stayed here. I'm like, but she's making sure everything else runs ready.
Right.
It's her job to make sure things run smoothly. Like, how could you just say that?
Right. Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that you maintain the right heart? How do you make sure that you have that attitude in the midst of all this? Because it can be very redundant. I mean, they think that you're in this presence of God all the time, every minute as you're working. But that's, I get mad just like everybody else at work sometimes with some of the employees I work with sometimes. And unlike with church, you pray to God. When you're in the secular world, and I say that non-church world, and you pray, and God sometimes removes them from the position, or removes them out your way. Yeah. When you're working at the church, God, I've never really seen God remove people from the church out of the way if they're in ministry. God's always like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to have to work on you on that, and I'm going to have to work on them. And usually, it's very less of a you don't see that very often in the church. So how do we maintain that heart attitude?
All right, so listen, what you're talking about is so important, and I think a lot of people don't understand the burden and the weight of not only responsibility, but trying to foster a relationship with God, an authentic, deep, intimate relationship with God, when, it's supposed to be your job. It's not easy to find that balance. And that's why a lot of pastors get burned out. That's why the average youth pastor is only there for 18 months or less, because they get burnt out from trying to do it. That's why it's so easy for pastors. Their personal devotion becomes, dear God, I have to find something to preach on Sunday, because it's so hard to balance. And, what I do, and let me just say, even my sister, who is also a youth pastor in Tampa, I love her. She's phenomenal. Just yesterday, she was telling me that her day off got shredded because, in one evening, two people showed up just knocking on her door, and, she let them in, and so her whole day off just got shredded. And so she said, this next coming day off, it's not just like a day off. It's, I'm putting up my boundaries, I'm putting up my walls, and I'm being intentional about it. It's sacred. And I think that is something that I try very, very hard to do it, maybe to a fault. Some people probably would disagree with the extent that I go to, but my time when I'm off, I guard it very, very carefully. My phone is almost always on Do Not Disturb. Not only Do Not Disturb, it's on the Do Not Disturb bedtime, where I can't even see notifications unless I intentionally look at notifications. And I check my phone often. I've never missed anything too important that I didn't respond to fairly quickly. But I'm going to guard my time off. I'm going to figure out what I need to do to be healthy. I'm trying to really hard to pay attention to when when you start to overwork. It's so easy to overwork. Last week, I don't know how much time I put in, but I know by the end of last week, I was just, feeling that I didn't guard my time as well as I normally might have, knowing that I had an event on the weekend as well. And so I said, okay, I need to stop myself. And so even this morning, my instinct after I wake up early and I do everything I normally do in the morning, it's like, all right, I'm going to go to work. And I stopped. because especially knowing we're going to be here kind of later in the afternoon, we're filming, it's going to be a long day. And if I go into work extra early when I'm already feeling tired and prone to fatigue, then I'm going to end up being more, it's going to just add on to it. So I paused and I said, no, fight your instinct, do something intentional that's good for you. And so I sat down this morning and I made myself breakfast, and I just sat there and just listened to podcasts and smiled and let myself rest instead of just coming to work and getting a jump on all the things that I had to do. And so for me, it's finding time to rest and being very careful to guard those boundaries where it's so easy to just blur the lines between church life and life. And a part of that self-care and guarding boundaries is guarding my time with Jesus. I'm going to be intentional about that. Apart from ministry, apart from anything else, that is my time, and that is sacred, and that is going to be the first thing I do every single morning, no matter what. So,
yeah, I think, Chris, you're right on with all of that, because some of the most unhealthy people I know are people that are in full-time ministry.
Yeah,
they whether it's in their emotions, whether it's in their physical bodies, or whether it's mentally or whatever the case may be, you have to be able to, as you said, set those boundaries. Now we get, because we're on Sunday. See, and what people don't realize a lot of times is that they walk into a service and man, they're just hallelujah, type thing. For us, we're always on in those moments. So we have to guard those quiet times with the Lord, those private times, whether they happen when you first come in here in the morning and you can get into the sanctuary where it's dark and there's nothing going on and you can spend some time before the Lord, or whether it's early in the morning when you get up with your word and in the cup of coffee or whatever, and allowing God to speak to you, because Sundays is not, we worship, but it's not a worship day. For us, we're doing other things. We're constantly working. So I think from that standpoint, you've got to be able to set the boundaries. These guys will attest to you. Part of my role as the executive pastor is that I kick them in the butt if I see them here on their days off.
Yeah. Which I thank you. That is honestly, I feel like that's rare and it's valued. We all value that.
I think that I've just seen way too many people. They go overboard and they neglect. They neglect that. Even Jesus told the disciples in the midst of ministry after a long day, he said, why don't you guys come away with me and let's go rest. Let's rest. So we have to we do that. And I thank God that everybody pretty much, I'll tell them, go get out of here. What are you doing here? Well, I had to come in and do something. And you can ask Nick. I will ask him, so what other day are you planning on taking off? Because that is so important, because it gets so easy to get tagged into, and let's face it, in ministry, there is that natural adrenaline rush when you're in the midst of it and God is speaking through you, God is using you, you see the impact that God is making on it. That's a powerful drug. I mean, it really is. So it's easy to get incorporated into all of that and crave that. Right. And if you don't intentionally, I love the way you said that, Chris. If we do not intentionally set aside those times for yourself, for your marriage, for your kids, for me, for kids and grandkids, you have to be intentional about those things, because I always said, what difference would it make if I won the entire world to Jesus, but my own kids ended up missing out on heaven? Because I was never around. Yeah. So I think that all of us have to find that balance between Mary and Martha. Right. We have to be able to sit at the feet of Jesus, because we don't have the luxury of being able to do, we have to find the time to do sitting at the feet of Jesus and to do the work that needs to be done.
I love that you talk about that, that feeling that, when God's working through you, and it's so affirming, and it's just, honestly, it's so rewarding and fulfilling. And I'm not a parent. I'm single, But I have to imagine, I imagine this is probably true for many jobs, not just ministry, but I have to imagine that feeling of fulfillment, it has to be a driving force behind why so many ministers or so many people put so much emphasis in work and are willing to put so much extra time on work because they feel so fulfilled at work. And there's definitely times like when you're around your kids or your family where you don't feel that way, and it's harder and it's challenging. And so it's definitely, I think, easier to disappear into ministry and to prioritize ministry over family or over kids because maybe it's easier or more affirming. And so, again, it has to be intentional. It's maybe constantly reminding yourself priorities and what's really important. Yeah. And, what's more important than the call of God? Well, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't do the call of God.
And I'm glad you said that, Chris, because the reality is that my calling as a husband is no less than my calling as a preacher.
Right.
My calling as a preacher is no more than my calling as a parent or as a husband. They're all great and high and mighty callings, and that deserve all of our time. But let's face it, as ministers, because let's face it, most of the time we're on, they see the best of us at all times, right? They see that, and so they're always telling you how great you are. And on the inside, they're telling you that, and on the inside, you go, if you only knew the half of it, how I went off on my kids this morning, type of thing. And we go home to reality.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We go home to a wife, to a spouse, and we go home to kids that see us at our worst and at our best. And they see us on the days when the kids and the wife would rather, I'm going to the store for a while. I can tell you need some time alone, that type of thing. And so it's heady stuff.
Right.
It's heady stuff. There's an adrenaline rush that and the adulation that people heap on people that are involved in ministry. Because let's face it, they see us at our best most of the time. Right. And they forget that we put our pants on the same way that everybody else does. Mm-hmm. We get up, on the wrong side of the bed. We go through those things. We have issues that we have to deal with. And so, but it takes the balance. Yeah. Because if we don't keep the balance, eventually you're going to fall off.
Absolutely.
You'll fall off and you'll crash and burn. And we see that all the time in ministry.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even not just ministry as in us as ministers on staff. Mm-hmm. And I like that term, ministers on staff, because everyone's called to be a minister.
Yes,
but we just happen to be on staff at a church.
Yep. Right. Yep.
As a volunteer, I mean, all three of us, if I remember correctly, really got started being a part of the church and working in the church as a volunteer.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And how do we? One of the things I've realized that I've had to do is try really hard to make sure that I don't burn out my volunteers by asking them to do their full-time job that they do at home plus volunteer full-time in the ministry.
Yeah.
How do we do that? What are some of the thought processes you have to try to help that mindset with them?
I mean, that's not easy.
Question. No.
There's no easy way to navigate that. Because one, we're dealing with volunteers. Every one of them have a different work life, a different home life, different levels that they're able to take. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't claim to have all answers, but some initial thoughts that just come into my mind are, one, ask them what level of commitment they're able to make. Work with them to find the amount of effort or work or time that they're willing to give. Yeah. And but also at the same time, you're working with them to help teach them and make sure they understand boundaries. Make sure they understand that they're cared for, that they're valuable, that we're not just trying to use them to do a job or use them to do our job, that we need them and we love them, but they're more important than the job that they're doing. And so helping them learn boundaries and then working with them to help establish their boundaries and then, schedule them and work with them and expect them to show up, but also be flexible when life gets in the way. It's hard.
Well, it's because we have to remember, like I said, this is our job.
Yeah,
it's our calling, but it's our job. And many times we forget that those volunteers are working. They're not. And a 40-hour work week is a thing of the past and has been for many years.
Yeah.
They're doing the 50, the 60 hours a week taking care of a home, taking care of a family, and then we want them to come in and with glad and sunshiny faces put in another 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday or whatever the case may be. And we all know that the tendency is we end up using the really good volunteers more than we do the other ones because they're really good.
Yeah.
And especially and they very rarely say no.
Well, and then and then they work with all the different ministries as well. So it's not even like so I might have a really good volunteer that might also help out with youth, that might also help out with life groups.
Thanks,
and trying to navigate that can become very, very difficult.
Yeah. And we don't always communicate with who's serving where. So now they've committed to like 4 different ministries. I don't even know why they're not showing up for me anymore. They're doing all this other stuff. You're right.
Yeah. And I think part of that, and this is going to give you kind of the pull back the curtain look a little bit. I'm so thankful for, this has nothing to do with something spiritual. It's something very practical that we've instituted using Planning Center here at the church, which is a software that allows us to schedule our people. It allows them to interact with the schedules. It allows them to block out times so that we know before we ever schedule, okay, this person's got this day, these days blocked out. And it does a lot of other things too for us. But as far as from that standpoint, it allows us to say, hey, here's a schedule, like not only for us with ushers and greeters and things like that, but for me, especially my main thing is scheduling our peacekeepers, our in-house security team. So it's really good for me to be able to know that, because there's a lot of them that they're involved on the worship team with Yvonne, they're involved with youth, they're involved with Nick, so that enables us to be able to say, so that we're not overworking everybody.
Right.
And what I try to do is at least in the ministries that I coordinate that in, is I try to find out, okay, what Sundays work best for you? What are you best able to, because I don't want to overuse you.
Right.
So you tell me what day. I'll work with your schedule. Let me know. And then if you don't let me know and I schedule you, then like you said, then that's on you to find somebody to fill in for you. But what we try to do is work with people, because we realize they're volunteers. Yeah. And they have a whole life, probably an overabundant life outside of, and we don't think twice because we're always working weekends. Yeah. But the only time they have off is weekends. And so they want to get away. They want to go camping. They want to go get away and do things. So that helps us a lot with what we're doing. But trying to coordinate that is sometimes can be difficult. But I think people appreciate that, the fact that they're taking into account in advance where we're at and what we're doing, and it helps us because worn out volunteers, they're no good to you.
Right. And churches do have a tendency of wearing out volunteers and burning them out, and then they don't do anything for 5 years because they're too scared to get back involved, and we have to guard against that.
Well, and the worst part I think from a church standpoint is that we have a hard time. We have a tendency to burn out volunteers, but as soon as they're burned out and they say they're burned out, we just move on. Yeah, we just kind of leave them where they're at and move on to the next, and that's difficult because with the ministry we always want to make sure we get the job done because it's our job. We have to get it done. We have to move forward, and I think in part of this is for you to get to know who we are and kind of some things that we deal with, but also for you. As you guys volunteer, help you guys understand our mindset and where we're coming from, and know that, like, one, we appreciate you, very, very much. The whole purpose, and Chris had mentioned this before or earlier, is it's our job to help prepare you to minister, and that's not just to minister on Sunday mornings at church, but to do what we can to give you some tools and talking points and things to help prepare you to minister at home, at work, in all areas of your life. Yep. To try to do that, and if we are not doing that, that's where come and talk to us. Come and talk to, if you don't attend our church, talk to ministers who are over you, the ministers on staff who are over you. And really try to get with them and say, okay, these are kind of the things that I'm interested in to help me kind of minister to my group, my crew. Because if we're all working towards the same direction, that's going to be good.
Right.
And if you are, the hard part is the volunteer that's willing to work every week, all the time,
right.
no matter what. And as I know, I get these volunteers, I'm like, oh yes, I'm so happy. But then I have to be very careful because one, we become dependent on them too much. We put more burden on them than need to be. But then also, we don't realize what's going on at home.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when stuff like that happens is I try to use that as a trigger to be like, okay, you say you're completely open. How is your home life? How is your work life? What's going on? And is it just, hey, I'm single, I'm bored, I have nothing else to do, I just want to be around people and do stuff.
Yeah.
Then that is going to be some great value for us to be able to do to be able to do that. If it's, dude, my wife's mad at me all the time, my kids are screaming all the time, or I'm at work and work is just horrible and I don't want to be there, I don't feel fulfilled, and this is the only place I can feel fulfilled. Okay, well let's not do all the time. Let's kind of scale that back. Let's kind of relook and see how can we get you that fulfillment, not just volunteering at the church, but in all areas of your life.
Yeah. Because, like Nick, you hit the nail on the head. There are some people out there that it doesn't matter what you could have. You could say, "Hey, I need volunteers to go out and scoop poop out in the yard." We've had a bunch of dogs running around or whatever, and you've got people that it doesn't matter what it is. They'll jump on the wagon. Hey, I want to volunteer. I'll help do that. And like I said, legitimately, there are those that they just want to help everywhere they can. But there's others that volunteering becomes their escape from dealing with issues. And that is so very true of what you say. And I think many times people aren't aware of the number of volunteers that it takes to make happen what we do.
Yeah.
I was just sitting here as you guys were talking, I'm thinking about that. From the time you pull in the parking lot, the gentleman that welcomes you with the "Good morning, everybody," Paul Chapman out in the parking lot, the people that are at the front door smiling and helping you to find direction and different things, the people that even in this season that are just recently that are there every morning if you are checking your kids in for youth ministry or for kids ministry, are there to take their temperatures and make sure that they get checked in and they get their tags. The teachers that are there early to prepare to make sure that our preschoolers are taken care of and our other older children that they're being taken care of. The nursery workers that are there, and then from that standpoint, not only greeters but people that the ushers that are there at the door to help you find a seat, that are there to help you with anything that you need, to the worship team that are there, the tech team that's there. Kids ministry, youth ministry, all of those avenues that it takes. People that are down at the front around the altar to pray with you, to stick around after a church service when God has ministered to your life and your heart and you feel like I need somebody, I'm in a crisis moment and I need someone to pray with me. Volunteers that are there to give of their time just to pray with you.
Right.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg around here. It's not even talking about what goes on Wednesday nights here, or at least what used to. We're getting ready to start back up with Wednesday nights and Sundays. Going to be flipped around a little bit. But it's amazing what it takes.
Yeah.
If it was up to just all the paid staff to do everything, this church wouldn't last a whole long time.
Right.
It really wouldn't.
At least we as staff members wouldn't.
Yeah, as staff members, we'd be laid out dead. But the volunteers, the people that are doing the work of the ministry, I mean, in things that you would not even think about. We have people here at this church that volunteer that when someone passes away and there is a service and a funeral dinner that we provide for the family, that are here for hours preparing, setting up, making sure that even right down to the centerpieces on the table are reflections of something about that individual that passed away. Mm-hmm. The different things, the people that come up and take care of the grounds, landscaping, things of that nature. It takes so many volunteers to make what we do happen that many times we just pull in and we take for granted. And so so just shout out to all of our volunteers, no matter where you are, who you are, what you do, and how often you do it.
Yes.
Kudos to you. Two
Absolutely.
thumbs up, because you make this place rock, and we could not do it without you.
Yeah. And I hope that our volunteers know that we're not just asking them to do a job, but they're doing ministry. They are every fruit that this church is able to produce, that God produces through us. It's because of them and their commitment and the value that they add. They are fulfilling a call of God on their life, and serving is so significant and so important. And I think of my small group leaders in our youth ministry. I consider that to be like the most important job, the most important position. And it's probably one of the highest commitment levels in the church, because it is a big commitment to be a small group leader, but it's also one of the most rewarding. And it's definitely my hope and my prayer that my small group leaders are getting as much value out of it, and fulfillment and satisfaction, getting more life out of it than they're giving into it. Right. It can be one of the most rewarding areas of ministry, as well as highest commitment. And we're always looking for more youth small group leaders. If you're feeling a prick on your heart right now, this isn't about recruitment, but
we are. We're always looking for volunteers. But this is not the purpose of this is not for that. We always want to make sure that we give you guys something of value. One of the things with all my volunteers that I do a horrible time communicating this, but really want to communicate this with them, is that to volunteer is inviting them to be a part of my life. Yeah. And that it's hard to communicate that, especially from a tech team. Where I can say, especially because I know, because that's what it is. Because like my live stream people, my camera people, the people who moderate, I can actually go through an entire month, not see these people, because they come in, they do what they're supposed to do, they leave when they're done. I'm bogged down by a lot of the other last minute things and last minute changes that need to happen. That it's very easy for them to be overlooked. But I really do, and I believe the same is for you guys, that when you volunteer, we really are inviting you to be a part of our life, be a part of what we're doing, to see us, to ask us questions, to not just from how to do the job, but even about faith and about kind of what's going on.
Volunteering can be a part of discipleship. Just one thing that I try very hard to communicate to all my leaders, but especially my small group leaders, is you're more important than the job that you're doing.
That's right.
And if you ever are in a season of life where you're just really struggling and you're feeling overwhelmed, and doing the job, doing the ministry is more draining for you and everything, we all have difficult seasons. And I hope that they know, and I try to communicate regularly, that if you need to step away for a while, for a season, do it. You're more important than the job that you're doing. Is it going to be an inconvenience for us? Possibly, yeah, sure. But you're more important than the role that you're fulfilling. And again, we all have that responsibility of making sure that we're healthy. And as pastors, as staff members, as shepherds, we have the responsibility to support our team and to make sure they're healthy.
Yes. That's because I've had people, Chris, that are involved, and they'll come up and they need to take a break for whatever reason, and I'm so sorry. It's like, why are you sorry?
Right.
Dude, take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Do what you've got to do. I understand. It's okay. Or, I just need a break right now. Well, you know what? Take your break. Take your break. It's not even a fact that you've earned it, but if you're not physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthy, you're not truly going to be able to minister to the way that God has wants you to, and the way that is most beneficial to you, if you're not a totally healthy and whole individual. So that's true. They are more important. You are more. Well, right now my wife's going through a tough time, and she really needs me at home. Then, man, what are you doing here?
Right.
Go home. Be with your kids. Help your wife. Do what you've got to do. And I think that's. And I get where people come from, because sometimes, volunteering in some places I've been in has been a life sentence, and that if you ever needed to step away, well, you're just not being faithful. You're just not.
You're missing out on God's calling for your life.
Yeah. And it's like, once again, the most important call, and I remember when a guy, one of my deacons at the church I pastored in Ohio, he drilled this into me. Mm-hmm. And he said, the most important call you have, pastor, is the call to your wife and the call to your kids. Mm. And if what you're doing as a pastor gets in the way of that or causes you not to be your best at that, then you need to step away from it. And I really appreciate that. I mean, because I know, ministry is what it is, especially full-time ministry. But it's ministry is especially hard if you're doing as a volunteer, because you're doing all this other stuff, that you're working with. But, your first call is always, number one, to your own health, spiritual, physical, and emotional, and number two, to the health and well-being of your marriage and your family. And it's okay to step away and take time for that.
Right.
It's not. No one's going to think any less of you, and if they do, shame on them.
Right.
That's just my feeling. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make sure that people are whole and healthy and all that kind of stuff.
So how do we assess that? How do we assess, or individually? So if I'm volunteering, how do I assess where I'm at, emotionally, spiritually, physically? How do I assess if I'm burnt out, or if I'm good to volunteer?
Well, that's tough. I haven't been in a position where I've been a volunteer in a while, but I think you have to ask yourself: am I just having a bad day? Because we all have bad days. We all have days where we don't necessarily want to do that thing. But when it becomes a longer season, when it's been like a month or 2 months, and you're just like, I just don't want to do it. I don't want to show up. There's definitely warning signs, I think, when it becomes more of a burden than a joy, and your mindset shifts from serving to, it's time to evaluate why. What's going on in my life. It's always good to pause and step back from the emotion and the weight of a thing and try to objectively look at it and figure out what's going on. Yeah. Do I really just not enjoy doing it anymore? Is there other stuff in my life that's draining my resources that would normally go to that? And it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. And so if you're feeling that, the best thing I could say is go to your ministry team leader and say, hey, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what's going on, but I want to at least start a conversation. Yeah. I'm not finding the joy in it that I once did. And, at least start a conversation. Don't necessarily step out right away unless you know that's what you need to do, but start a conversation. And, sometimes we get dissatisfied in something and we want to make just quick decisions and just change it. And so I'm not enjoying it, so I'm going to shift the whole thing. So maybe there's value in, working with your ministry team leader. Maybe they can shift what you're doing around as well and help you find something that will be more fulfilling. Yeah. Work with your team leader, and don't just make an executive decision on your own. And because again, your team leader, they're on your side. They want to support you and they value you more than what you do. Yeah. And,
that's good. I think also it's important for you to know the motivation for why you're leading. You have to ask that constantly.
Yes.
Why am I volunteering?
That's great.
If I feel like you have to be honest enough with yourself to admit, okay, I'm volunteering so much because I really don't want to deal with what's going on at home. Mm. If you find yourself in that spot, that's not a good place to volunteer from. If you're finding yourself constantly dreading, oh man, I got to do this Sunday again. Again, it's the second Sunday. Oh my! If you find, why are you doing it? If you have no joy, I'm not talking about working hard. I'm talking about if you've lost your joy, if you find yourself you're doing it to escape.
Right.
You have to ask yourself, what's the motivation for it? If you find yourself and your motivation is because doing it makes me feel good and people love on me and that type of thing, then you have to take a good hard look at your motivation. Mm-hmm. Because if your motivation is not to simply be a servant, but you're doing it simply because I feel better. Now, there's nothing wrong with feeling better, but when you find like that's the only reason for it, people appreciate me more.
Right.
You have to question. You have to take an honest look at your motivation, and then be willing to say, like Chris said, go and talk to your ministry team lead. Go talk to them, because I guarantee you, they're not going to sit there and say, "Well, what's wrong with you? You need to buck up, dude.
Right.
Suck it up." They're not going to do that, because,
and if they do, you probably should be volunteering for them anyways.
Exactly. If that's the mindset, and sometimes it's just good to take a break, for Pete's sake.
In any area.
Any area, take a break. I would rather have somebody come to me and say, I'm starting to feel a little worn out. I just need to step away for a while. I would rather have somebody come to me and say that than to all of a sudden they're there and they have a meltdown and they go off on some kid or they go off on some person because they asked where the bathroom was. How long have you been coming here? Type of deal. So I think in that sense, being able to understand your own emotional well-being and your own, have an understanding of who you are, where you're at, and that it's okay. And like you said, maybe you've been involved in the nursery. God bless our nursery workers when they were having 15 to 20, 2-year-olds and under in there. God bless those people that were working in that nursery. I think I would just crawl over in a corner in a ball and just kind of go into spasms. But here's the deal. There are different seasons and times for different ministries. Yeah. Maybe your season was for that, but now God is directing you in a different way. That's okay.
Right.
Don't be afraid to talk about that, explore that, and find that out. The last thing I would want to do, honestly, is if I had 2 or 3 little toddlers at home, to turn around and come and do that at church. I understand how we sometimes have to, in order to staff some of these areas, if you have kids in there, sometimes it's good for you to take a turn and serve.
Yeah.
I get that. But don't be afraid to explore other areas and be honest with yourself.
Right.
If you find yourself, I don't want to go to church this week. If you find yourself, man, I feel like I got a cough. Maybe I can't go in today. If you're finding yourself doing that, then it's time to explore whether it's taking a break or maybe your season for that ministry is over. There's different seasons for different things, and it's okay to explore those.
I'll even take a little step further, because even if you find yourself always physically, not even just like, I'm going to fake a cough, but like you're physically starting to feel ill, that could be your body actually telling you, hey, it's time to kind of take a break. It's time to slow down some. So I think as we wrap up, we want you to get to know who we are and how we're doing things, and in that for those who are new and are not even knowing what a minister does, a minister on staff does, a pastor does, to give some context kind of around that, as well as if you are volunteering, because you guys make the ministry work.
Right.
The volunteers are really what makes the ministry work. And if we, more than anything else, we want to speak into your life, and we want you to be better. We want want you to be more Christ-like in all areas of your life. And we believe that if you live a Christ-like area, you're going to feel the most fulfilled. You're going to feel the most connected to God, and you're going to want to grow the most during that time. So I want to just thank you guys for taking today and listening to us. And if you have anything that you'd like us to talk about, please put it in the comments section, as well as subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss when we go live. But we want to make sure that we speak about what is going on in your life, and we can be real people having real conversations for you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. God bless.